So welcome, first of all. And in my work, I work with narratives. And so far, the narratives have all been taking place behind and between the works. And I decided I really want to put them where they belong, so in the center. And since this is the first step, the initiation, I wanted to do a performance that is a little bit of a thought process about what a performance is. So I decided to set a simple set of rules for myself. And what I did was I made this video, and that video is about the process, my process of working, which is a little bit mysterious even to me. And what I decided to do is to set this simple set of rules. I'm going to let it run twice, the same thing. And so I have a video and I have a script. And letting the video run puts this kind of pressure on me, and it puts a time pressure, and I'm interested in this pressure and this possibility of lack of correlation between the script of the video and the script of my talking, because I'm interested in working with the unconscious, and putting this kind of pressure and this lack or gap allows the possibility of something unusual to happen, or a lack of correlation. And I think of performance as a designated amount of time. So there's this time of the performance, and there's a time of the image. And I also thought of it as, in terms of my practice, the sort of center, the core of my practice is drawing, and the activity of drawing. And so when I draw, this primal urge to draw, which is not necessarily meaningful in that sense, it's a sort of nervous tension or something that happens within the body. And so what I do is I perform the act of drawing. And the other thing I decided was that I want to do something that's unusual or a little bit uncomfortable. One of the things that I found the most uncomfortable is to be silent. There's this compulsion to talk all the time, like this compulsion to draw, to not stop moving. And there's a compulsion to talk. So sometimes I'm going to be silent. Now, performance is, we usually think of performance as a kind of art practice. And so there's a music performance or there's a theater performance. But we also perform roles in the social world. So we perform a social role, we perform an activity, a computer performs its tasks. So I perform in my work, when it becomes a public activity, I perform the act of research. And here you have some images from the Anthropology Museum in Basel, where I researched the anthropological archive. And it's very difficult to be in an anthropological archive, I found, because of the weight of history and the weight of colonial history and all these objects being trapped in the archive. So what I did in order to be able to be there is that I performed the act of looking by moving the camera across my body. And I moved the camera, and in that way I performed the act of looking with the object. Now, part 3 is machine, and I decided to work directly with performance when I was invited to do research in a dance archive in Salzburg. And when I was in Salzburg, I discovered these dance notation diagrams. They're called Laban notations. And I found them very beautiful, and both intellectually very pleasing and also in a formal sense. But I also found them kind of hilarious because they're kind of dictatorial. I thought, oh, is this a dance? Is this how you break down a dance? Is this what a dance means, this kind of digital rendition of the movement? And so I got this image of these being used to teach a robot how to dance. So the image of the robot came up. And once you have this idea of score and performance and robots, then very interesting questions come up. Because, for example, a human dancer, when they read the dance notations, each human will perform the dance in a different way. And each time they do it, they will perform it in a different way. But once you program a robot, the robot will do the dance exactly the same way every single time. And what you see now is a discipline called Bagua. And you see the Taoist master Liu Hongzhi performing the act of performing Bagua, which is interesting also in terms of the script, because there are very precise movements that you learn. So there's a very structured, precise movement, but then the way you move is spontaneous. So you move in a circle and you string these movements together in a spontaneous way. Of how different cultures approach the relationship between the body and the mind. And here you also see a specific kind of relationship of a mind-body relation, in that the robot is performing, but you see there's a guy with a console behind it, and he is in fact the one making the robot move. Even though it's called an autonomous movement robot, you still need the guy with the console telling it how and why to move. So I realized that if you have a performance with a robot and a human and a script and a script for the performance, very interesting questions come up about consciousness. And we are in fact, as a culture, as a global capitalist scientific culture, we can't handle consciousness. We don't know how to deal with the phenomenon of consciousness, which is really weird, because you have it, everybody in here has consciousness, we all possess consciousness, I have it, you have it, that's why we can be here. But it's something that we can't measure it, we can't define it, we can't even look at it in a normal way that we look at other things. So science really has no method to deal with consciousness, and it's a problem, especially since right now we are not only, we are in the process of programming machines to become conscious, or at least right now we're programming artificial intelligence, but people in the field think that in fact the machine is about to become conscious. And there is a theoretician and an inventor called Ray Kurzweil, who's one of the most extreme proponents of this view, because he thinks that we are in fact about to evolve into machines, and not in the distant future, but he thinks soon, like right now. And he thinks this because the computing power, there's this kind of graph of computing power, and the computing power is about to exponentially explode. And so once the computer can work on its own structure, then it can become infinitely more intelligent and in fact supersede any biological entity. And so he thinks that we are, as humans, as a culture, about to evolve into not only machines, but one giant machine that he calls the singularity. And I was very interested in how people in the AI field, what do they think consciousness is? And so I have a list that I got from Wikipedia, which I love. And I'm going to just read you a few definitions of what they think consciousness is. So just as these are a few examples. So human consciousness, or any consciousness like a mosquito even. So here are some of the functions. One of them is flagging and debugging, recruiting and control, decision-making or executive function, metacognitive and self-monitoring function, auto-programming and self-maintenance function, which I assume is just the desire to survive. Anyway, so some of the principles for the artificial consciousness that they're programming are conscious and unconscious states in the machine, awareness of self, representation of meaning, learning utterances, learning language, will, instinct, and emotion. So for them, consciousness is not a real thing, but a program running in neural networks. So this is also a work about repetition. So I draw. And what is it that makes me draw? Is it my mind that makes me draw, or is it my body that makes me draw? I'm not really sure. But I don't think it's a mistake to connect it, that sort of initial urge to the unconscious. And so I decided to do a little bit of research and to go back to the origin of the unconscious as we know it, which is begins with Freud. So Freud discovered the unconscious with his patients in his office, lying on the couch. And his patients were hysterics. And now the hysteric was usually a woman whose body refused to work in some spectacular way. And these photographs you see are taken by Freud's mentor, Charcot, who took photographs of some of his patients at the mental hospital in Paris at Salpêtrie during their crises. And what I found really remarkable was that often the hysterical body would take on the shape of what looks to me like yoga poses. But Freud's patients lay on the couch, immobile, and they reminisced. So they started talking. Their flow of language continued until, if they were lucky, the woman said something, and whatever she said somehow freed her mind and her body began to function again, and which is kind of an incredible thing, that the mind and the body relate in that way. But Freud very specifically told his patients that all he could do is to take them from the abject misery of hysteria to common everyday unhappiness, or what they normally call a healthy ego. In that sense, I use the unconscious to explain the inner drive to draw, but I also, during the research process, I also very consciously work with the unconscious. So what I do is I engage with knowledge structures, and to the extent of my capacity, I really want to know what different disciplines have to say about their specific topics. So when I research, I try to as rationally engage with the discipline as possible. But then, when I make the art object, I put away the rational structure and I try to feed it through my body and my emotions, and use a kind of non-willing will and the chance process, and to see what comes out. And so I did the research in Basel, and then I went back to New York and I started to make drawings, and I got a little bit worried when what was coming out with these strange bound robots, because what does that robot have to do with an anthropology collection? But then when I went back to select the object, it actually made perfect sense, because of the self-ethologizing collection of Swiss and European objects, which really were the initiation of my thinking of the European concept of the body as a machine. But of course now we also think of the mind as a machine. And these drawings, even though they're interesting in terms of movement, they also, for me, function as a metaphor for the language and the scripts and the coding that constantly run through our minds, and that we really have no control over. So there's something running constantly through our minds. And what I realized was that there are techniques, in fact, and I started studying with a Tibetan Dzogchen master. And Dzogchen is a technique which allows you to go behind and maybe before all the coding and the conditioning of our minds, and to look at consciousness directly. And what I found, I'm really at the beginning of this process, was that if it happens, you get this incredible sense of freedom. I'm very interested then in the kind of anthropology of movement, of how different cultures relate to this. So I've also been studying Bagua for about 8 years from one of the students of Byung Jae, who is an American, and who was actually adopted by him as a son so that he could transfer all his knowledge. So I feel directly connected to this tradition, and I've been doing it for about 8 years. And what's extraordinary is that when you move in a circle, something happens so that your body and your mind connect, and your mind becomes a lot more free. So what it is a promise is more than just common and happiness, and it is a promise of something more coherent. And then you learn by repeating and repeating and repeating the motions. And now these are Sufis in Egypt, and it's something that's very close to my heart and my heritage. But it also illustrates a problem, because here the men are performing and the women are sitting and witnessing. So as a woman, this is an issue for me. And a nightclub in Berlin, which is a mass culture way of dealing with some of the mind-body connections. Okay, so I just want to talk a little bit about this robot directly, because I think it's the most amazing and beautiful machine in the world right now. And it's made by a company called Boston Dynamics, and this is the friendly domestic version called Spot. But there's also these like huge, scary versions, and one of them was tested and eventually rejected by the US military because it was too noisy. But for example, the other version doesn't even have a head. So what I found really beautiful about them is that it's pure engineering in its purest form. So there's no prettifying factors. My dream, and it's very difficult because they're very expensive, but my dream is to get one of these robots to perform these diagrams and to set up a kind of arena, a performative arena or a performative structure that would allow different fields or different entities to interact and to help us think through all these things that I've been talking about today and do a performance. And now, again, the graph by Ray Kurzweil, who thinks we're about to evolve into the giant machine. And what I found interesting in what he said when I read his book was that he thinks that if we copy our brain, so we can copy our brain directly into hardware and software, and if you do that, then your consciousness will be that. So you can copy your consciousness, and he thinks that then we can upload our consciousness into the giant machine that's coming and live forever. And that seems to be a mistake, although I don't know why. And I realized one of the things, so learning Bagua, which this is a mechanical demonstration with some. Anyway, this is Bagua. So learning Bagua, I realized that you do not just think with your brain. You're not just your brain. Your consciousness is not just your brain, but it's your body too. And in our culture, we tend to separate the two. So we think with our brain and then we exercise with our body, but the two never really meet. And this also made me think about the interface between the human and the machine or the computer. And right now our interface is mostly with the screen. So we have screens, we have little screens, big screens, medium screens. And this is really bad for our bodies. So I'm really curious about whether they can figure out a way that we can interact with the machine in a different way and not, with a way that engages with our whole physique. And I can't talk about this because it's too much right now, but I'm going to finish up by talking about a recent development in artificial intelligence, which is Google Translate is actually one of the main functioning forms of artificial intelligence right now. And in December, something extraordinary happened, which is it just by itself got incredibly a lot better. And they're all very excited and they try to figure out, okay, why did it get better? And what was fascinating is that it created its own language. So if it translated a language, original language, and that made the whole translation process a lot better. Although we tried to translate the press release by Google Translate and it only made it a little bit better. But in any case, something extraordinary happened just recently in AI. So I'm ending on a kind of hopeful note. So This is it. Thank you very much.